Hello, this is a Centerity 4.1 demo, and my name is Lara Fredericks, and we're going to be going over a little bit of terminology before we begin diving into the system. So first of all, the Centerity system works off the concept of business services. The idea of business services is to create one truth across the board. So let's say that you are an SAP technical manager, but oftentimes your SAP application is affected by network issues or storage issues, and you can't track that down with just monitoring the SAP. So Centerity comes and collaborates all of these different IT technologies into one wholesome view where you can easily do root cause analysis and know where is the issue that is affecting the entire business. So in terms of terminology that we're going to be using in this demo session, first of all, hosts are components that can be represented by an IP address. They must have an IP address. It can be any device. It can be a server, it can be a database, it can be an application, or it can be a switch or storage, and so on. Just any device that we're going to be adding metrics to, and we call that a host. So next we have metrics, which are key performance indicators or KPIs. These can be memory usage, traffic, they can be database jobs, and it can be just any component that we monitor on a host. And then we have the business service, which is the logical container that usually will contain a bunch of metrics that are related to different hosts, to different groups, and it just combines everything together. The BSM can also contain sub-levels, it can contain business services within business services, and so on. So next we have the Centerity architecture. The standard edition for Centerity is comprised with one operating system with the Centerity interface installed on it, and that operating system is the one that is creating the connection to all the different application and components or hosts in the system. The second option for Centerity architecture is our Centerity Enterprise version. And with an Enterprise version, you can have a nearly unlimited amount of nodes that can represent different sites, or it can just be for like an amount of load. So in this instance, everything is still managed through the Centerity Enterprise Manager and the web interface. However, the nodes are the ones that are the workers, and they are going to be reaching out to the different hosts that we are going to be monitoring. There are a few things that will affect the need for a Centerity Enterprise Manager. The first and foremost is capacity. Each Centerity node can contain up to 20,000 to 24,000 checks. It depends on the load. And going past this capacity would require a Centerity Enterprise. Secondly, it's the frequency of monitoring. So the default in Centerity is 5 minutes of frequency, and this can be changed, and the more frequent the monitoring, the more heavy the load is, and the more the requirement for additional Centerity nodes. And now, the last thing is completely separated networks, and in that case, if we still want to manage everything from one wholesome Centerity enterprise, then that enterprise would only need access to the nodes, and we can still see these two separated networks or more in one enterprise and in one wholesome view. So now let's go into the demo. The Centerity dashboard is the first thing that we encounter once we enter Centerity. And this dashboard is comprised from a variety of widgets that the customer can select, and there are about 50 different widget choices. And we can see here the business services we've mentioned earlier, and we have some maps, the overall critical business service overview, and then we also have our event console. We also have a default dashboard, which is the first dashboard that you will have in the system before configuring any dashboards, and this is kind of a high-level overview of the entire system. Different users in Centerity can actually have different permissions, so any user will have permission to the specific devices that we're allowing them to see based on the host groups they are associated to. And there are also different permission levels to the users, so we have a monitor view user, which will only be able to view only. And then we have our group admin, which will be able to have administrative privileges, but only on the specified hosts that they own. And then we have the full admin, which will give access to the different settings for monitoring and all the different hosts that we're going to monitor. So now we can go to business services. And the business services is probably the most critical dashboard that we have in Centerity, because it can show you the status of your overall business. So here you will be able to see in our example that there are 4 business services in the warning status, and then we have one that is in breakdown status, which means it's completely not working. So let's go into one of our business services. So once we click in, we can see that this is the Customer Analytics via SAP HANA Vora business service. And once we can look here in the service levels, we can see that the business service is comprised of security, of network, MapR, operating systems, SAP HANA, so on. On the right side, you can also see weights, which means that the user has defined every layer to have a different value and different effect for the business service. So in this example, security is almost like one of the lesser business services, including the network, because they only affect the business service by 10%. But even in this weight, you can still define different metrics to be breakdown metrics, which would mean that if we define a metric as breakdown, when it goes critical, we can still bring the entire business service to a critical state. So we have a lot of customization options within this. We can also say once a specific level is actually below its 50%. So let's say that in this instance, someone defined that this level will go into breakdown after it's down by 50%. Even though this weight is only 10%, if this was down by 50, it would still make the business service critical. So we won't miss anything important. Now, on this level, we can just see I have a small issue in MapR, and then over here with SAP Vora, I have something very critical going on. So we can see that. And in this instance too, every metric can be defined to have a higher value on the level. Okay, and then in the events, we can actually have an overview of the different events that are currently occurring on the business service. And in map, this is a Visio that was created for the specific business service, so we can see that we have different operating systems for SUSE, we have Lenovo X Clarity, we have MapR, and this is also a live map, so once clicked on a host, we will actually be navigated to its own information. Then we have the hypermap, and this is also a automatically generated map, and it's kind of a easy visual way to see what metrics are currently critical. And if we want to know a little bit more of what is monitored on that specific host, we can also click through and also open the entire metric list. And for now, we're going to skip the graph section as we will go over that in a different part of the demo. So now we have the event console. And the event console is a standard expectation out of a monitoring system, and in Centerity, we try to make it the most easy, accessible event console to anyone that wants to see the different events that are currently occurring in the system. One of the best features in this event console is actually filter sets. So let's say that I'm an admin user and I see everything on the system, and it's a little bit difficult to filter through if I want to find a specific alert or even just have a comparison of what is currently going on one specific metric across my entire platform. And for this purpose, we have what we call filter sets. So this is how we create a filter set. So we filter by metric, and then just by name, we can say, I want to see all of my Linux load average at this moment. And I also just want to see it even if it's an OK status. And this is going to be filtered for me. And you can kind of see here already all of my different Linux load average metrics on this demo, and just one of them is actually in critical state. These filter sets can also be saved, so we never have to go back and recreate them. So we can see that I actually have a filter set for load average already saved here. And in this instance, what's good is that even when I exit this page completely, I can actually just go back and just view it again without having to create a new filter. And I can always save a new filter set. Okay, so next we have our host groups. So in the host groups, they are logical containers that basically contain the different hosts on the system. Any host can actually be related to 2, 3, or an unlimited amount of host groups. And this is because they are related to permissions and also just the way that you manage the system. Our example, we mostly have host groups based on different technologies, but let's say that we have a customer, as seen in this example below. We have different Lenovo and the different components that we have on that host group. So in this example, you can see that we can just have different filters, and the Lenovo Linux systems would be under Lenovo Linux, but they would also be under the entire host group of Linux servers. For the situation that someone only manages Lenovo, but then also for the Linux IT people to have access to these same servers as well as the other Linux servers in the environment. So every host group can actually also be managed on some level. So first of all, they also have a little hyper map, a little bit different than what we saw before. This is also automatically generated. Then we have our actions, and actually here you can schedule downtime for the entire host group. So downtime is great for different maintenance situations where you can just set up for the system not to alert on the critical events that are going to occur during maintenance. We can also add maintenance period retroactively. So this means that if someone forgot to initiate the maintenance period and it just occurred, we can retroactively add it. And once the host group has a downtime period scheduled for it, this will not affect the SLA, which is very important. And then you can see we have the enabling notifications, disabling notifications upon need, and so on. And under the status, we can also just see the event console for the entire group. And we can also, again, filter it. And yeah. So now I want to show you an example of a graph. So any metric in Centerity will have an automated graph created. Any numerical value will be graphed. And in this example, we have the MySQL web application critical events, and we do have some up and downs here. Once I click on history, I can also go to beyond this day. So we have the hourly graph for it, the daily graph, we have the weekly graph, and monthly. And once I see some peaks, I can actually come closer and see the exact time of the event and drill into that. All of these numbers can actually be downloaded as a CSV file in this button right here, so we can also save that for future reference. Next, we have the report section. Centerity has 13 pre-built reports in the system, and we're going to go over some of the most important reports today. First, we have the SLA report. The SLA report is a report that is going to tell you what was the availability of the different components that we're going to be reporting on. So we actually have several things that we can report on. We can report on different hosts, host groups, metrics, or business services. And business services would really be the most preferred way to go about and the way that we recommend. First of all, with business services, we have the most control over what affects the SLA. We can show the most real perspective of things that actually affect the SLA without the nudging things that don't truly affect the SLA in the moment. So we can configure different things. So first of all, we're going to configure the time period that we want this report on. We're going to do a 7-day period. And then we also have something that's called time period, which is a little bit different. This is actually going to say the hours that we are responsible for the SLA. So let's say that you are only responsible for working hours. You wouldn't want to be reporting on 24/7. Or the opposite, if you're on non-working hours, you wouldn't be reporting on 24/7. The default is 24/7. Also, custom time periods can be created upon the need. Then we have state types. So hard states are metrics that were critical for 10 minutes or more. And then soft states are metrics that were critical for 10 minutes or less. And here we can decide whether the soft states should be affecting our SLA or not. For now, we're going to leave this as it is. And all of these reports can actually be generated for PDF or Excel. Once we save them, we can also create schedules, so basically sending these reports in different time periods to a specific group of contacts or just one contact. So nothing has to be recreated every time. This can be completely automated and sent to an email. So let's generate this first report. So in this first report, we can see that we had a 91% availability. And once we go down, we can actually filter and see what were the most critical events for that time. So we can see that this SAP Vora Note Health was critical 100% out of my 7-day period. And then we have things that are a little bit lower. So this was just like less than 20% of the time. And we can see that for the warning statuses as well. Once we go below, we can also see a duration, which is essentially your MTTR on how long each alert lasted before it got resolved. So we can see here. We can also filter it by status, so we can have that. Then once we go down below, we have an even further detail of the actual outputs that happened on that metric and on that host. So this is actually a very detailed SLA report, and we have another option that is a more high-level SLA report, which is more of an executive SLA that we're going to go over in a little bit. Second, we have the history report. And the history report is a pretty self-explanatory report where you can just generate the history of the different metrics and the statuses that they had within the last time period that you choose. So let's do 24 hours, and let's say that we only want to see Linux servers. And we want to only see hard states, and let's just not generate it on any alert type, but maybe just these three, and we can generate that report and kind of see what were the critical events. So we have a lot of this MySQL critical alerts. Yeah, it kind of shows you, goes over what happened in the last 24 hours. Okay, so let's go on to our next report. So now we're going to do a summary report, which is actually a wonderful report even when we have business services. Sometimes some alerts that are constantly creating noise in the event console can be missed because maybe they're not critical enough to even be part of a business service and they're neglected. So we have a solution for this, and this is actually going to show us the top alert producers that can also be very important as they create a lot of noise and just could show of a different, bigger issue. So we're going to generate our last 7 days top alert producers. We can see here that we actually have one host that created 16 alerts. It went up and came down 8 times. And then in the metrics section, we can see that our MySQL web application critical events created so many events. It was 1,200 events. And we can see the breakdown of the different alerts down below. So it gives you a lot of insight of what is going on in the environment, even if these alerts are not part of a business service and do not necessarily affect business SLAs, but they're still important to the overall IT. So now let's go to our trends report. So trends is a great report if we want to kind of compare cluster environments, we want to kind of see if our cluster is functioning properly, if there's proper load balance, and it can actually be used for many things from like traffic to anything that you can really imagine. It creates a graph that will compare between the different hosts. So let's take in our example. In my data source section, let's just say that I only want to see the average 5-minute load average between the host in the last 7 days. So now this graph is being generated, and I can even see already below kind of like a comparison between them. Now in my graph, I can zoom in. I can see that a few of them are under a very, very similar load, which is wonderful because in a cluster environment, that is what we want. Now we can see down below some of the percentage utilization from the entire resource. And now let's go to our usage summary, which I mentioned before, and that is our high-level executive SLA report. So this SLA report, or usage summary report, takes into account only events that occurred within the week. So in this SLA report, the metrics that are taken into account are calculated a little bit differently, and we'll see that in a moment. We're going to just generate it for the last 7 days and see my SLA. So I can see here that I had a 99.13% of availability on this business service in the past 7 days. This daily view graph can kind of show you which days were a little bit lower. For me, it was on the 8th. And then we can see the different level breakdown and where was the exact issue. So we can see that we had a little bit of a lower SLA on Mapper and on hardware, but overall good. And you can also see a daily breakdown, so it'll actually tell you the exact date and the SLA for that level on that day. So in this way you can see that an executive would be able to know where the issue was, but it doesn't tell you the same level of detail that is unnecessary for this high-level view. You know who to turn to, you know which teams are responsible for everything, but you don't need to know like the exact alert that occurred. You can trust the business service to know how much it affected the SLA and how important it is. And then we have a little bit of a stat graph, which you can see a little bit of a downhill over here. But yeah, this SLA is actually really good, so we don't see any significant low. And now we have our maps section in the system. So the maps section can really show a lot, especially when what you need is something visual. So one of my favorite examples is using a geographical map to kind of show sensors across a location. So let's say that you have many active cameras, or even for retail, let's take a store or even multiple stores where we have shelf sensors, and these should indicate whether we're low on inventory. And if we just make an image of these shelves and the location that they are in, we can automatically and easily know where there's a problem. And this is sometimes something that can be missed through an event console because it's so little, but on a map, when you see something goes red, you pay attention a little bit more. So let's look into some more options. So the maps can be, as I mentioned, geographical. They can just be a Visio created to show an environment. It can be an image of a hardware. It can show you the different interfaces on a switch. So in a way, the sky is the limit here because it can be any image. And let's go into one of our Visio examples. We saw it briefly earlier. So everything is completely clickable. So once I click on something, I'm going to be automatically re-navigated to that host. I can see what's going on with it. This one was completely green, but we can click through. We can find out some more information, generate a few reports if we want, and so on. So in addition to different custom maps, we also have our topology map. So if we click on a topology map, it is actually based on our discovery mechanism, and this is a very, very broad one of multiple networks. We can see a vCenter, and you can see a lot of connectivity going on here. And this is actually recreated every time we run our topology discovery, and it creates the topology and adds any new hosts that are found on the environment. And updates any necessary topology updates. So in our discovery, we actually support device awareness, which can go up to currently about 20 to 30 device types. There is also the automatic topology. Our discovery can be scheduled and having a report sent to a user to update what we have found. The different new devices can be automatically added to the system as well based on the device awareness. So now, last but not least, we have our traffic analyzer. So traffic analyzer is an add-on to the Centerity system, and this is creates a traffic analytical dashboard that is showing you the different senders, the different traffic categories that we're seeing from the network devices configured, the talkers, destinations, flows. So you can get a very detailed information about what's going on with the network. The traffic dashboard also correlates the different hosts that are monitored on the system. So hosts that are enabled for traffic analyzer will have a traffic tab on the host, and we will be able to go into their traffic information. For example, we have this vCenter, and we can see the different traffic flows going in. And this is it. Thank you for watching the Centerity demo, and for any questions, please contact us.